Dad, please don't get angry. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me. Those 9 words, spoken in a whisper, by a 7-year-old girl on her knees on a cafeteria floor, picking pieces of her own lunch out of the dirt while other children laughed. Nathan Cole stood in that doorway and felt something break inside him that he has never fully been able to describe. Not rage, something quieter and far more dangerous. If this story moved you, subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this reaches. Nathan Cole was not the kind of man who cried easily. He had buried his wife. He had raised a daughter alone. He had rebuilt his life from nothing more than a set of socket wrenches, a rented bay in a garage, and the kind of stubborn refusal to quit that men in his family called pride, and everyone else called foolishness. He had survived things that would have finished softer people. And in all of it, through the hospital hallways and the funeral arrangements and the years of school lunches packed alone in the dark before Sophie woke up, Nathan Cole had not broken. I thought he knew what it felt like to hurt. He was wrong. The morning it happened started exactly the way every other morning started. Sophie was running late. She was always running late on Wednesdays because Wednesdays were library days, and Sophie could never decide which books to return and which ones deserved one more night on her nightstand. Nathan had stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her stuff her backpack with the particular combination of urgency and absolute chaos that only a 7-year-old could manage, and he had laughed. He had kissed the top of her head. He had told her the same joke he told her every single Wednesday, something about a librarian and a lost elephant that Sophie absolutely hated and absolutely waited for, and she had groaned exactly the way he knew she would and grabbed her lunch bag off the counter and run out the door. Except she hadn't grabbed her lunch bag off the counter. She had grabbed her backpack. The lunch bag was still sitting on the counter when Nathan turned around at 10:15 in the morning and saw it there next to the coffee maker, neatly packed and completely forgotten. He almost left it. He had a truck in the bay that needed a transmission and a customer coming at noon. He almost called the school and asked them to cover it from whatever emergency lunch fund they kept for situations like this. He almost did a dozen different sensible things. Instead, he wiped his hands on a shop rag, told his assistant, Marcus, he'd be back in 30 minutes, climbed into his truck, and drove to Mesa Ridge Elementary. I was going to embarrass her. He had already decided that. He was going to walk into that cafeteria and find her table and say something so completely magnificently dad embarrassing that she would groan loud enough for the whole room to hear. He was going to make her laugh, even if she pretended she wasn't laughing. That was the plan. He was still smiling about it when he pushed open the cafeteria door. He stopped. The room was loud, the way elementary school cafeterias are always loud. That specific dense wall of sound made up of 100 small conversations in chairs, scraping and trays clattering, and someone always dropping something. Nathan stood in the doorway and let his eyes adjust and started scanning the tables for Sophie's blonde hair and her yellow sweater. He found the yellow sweater, but Sophie wasn't sitting at a table. She was beside one, on her knees, on the floor. Her hands were moving carefully, deliberately picking pieces of food up from the tile and placing them back onto her tray. One piece at a time. Her head was down. Her shoulders were pulled inward in a way that made her look half her already small size. And the children at the table above her, the ones whose table she was beside, some of them were laughing. Not all of them. Some were just watching. But enough were laughing that the sound of it reached Nathan across the entire length of that cafeteria. He did not move for what felt like a very long time. Later, he would not be able to explain exactly why he didn't walk straight across that room and start asking very loud questions. He would say it was because something stopped him, something colder than anger and more careful. He would say he stood there long enough to notice everything he needed to notice before anyone noticed him. He noticed the 2 adults near the far wall, a cafeteria aide and a staff member he didn't recognize, both of them present, both of them not moving toward his daughter. One was looking at her phone, the other was talking to a colleague. Neither was helping. He noticed a boy at the table, dark-haired, bigger than the others, sitting with the particular relaxed comfort of someone who had never once worried about consequences. He was laughing the loudest. He was watching Sophie with the kind of casual, entitled amusement that Nathan had seen on grown men's faces before, men who understood that they could do what they wanted because nobody with real power was ever going to stop them. He noticed the stain on Sophie's sweater, the yellow sweater, the one she had put on that morning because it was her favorite. The stain was already dried. That meant it had been there long enough to set. That meant this had not just happened. And then Sophie looked up. She looked up and she saw him standing in the doorway. And for one fraction of a second, her face did something completely unguarded. Relief, raw and immediate, the look of a child who has been waiting for rescue without letting herself believe rescue was coming. And then the relief changed. Nathan watched it happen, watched his daughter's face reorganize itself into something careful and controlled and afraid. Not afraid of him, he understood that, immediately afraid for him. And she got up from the floor and she walked toward him quickly, quietly, and she pressed close to his side and she looked up at him and she whispered the 9 words that broke him. Dad, please don't get angry. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me. Nathan Cole looked down at his daughter. He looked at the dried stain on her sweater. He looked at the tray she was still holding, the food she had carefully retrieved from the floor, now sitting back on it in a way that made his throat close. He said nothing for a moment. Then he gently took the tray from her hands. He set it on the nearest empty table. He crouched down so that he was at her level, and he looked at her directly and he said very quietly, "Let's sit down, Bug." He pulled 2 chairs to a table near the wall away from the noise. He opened the lunch bag he had driven across town to bring her the sandwich. She liked the apple slices, the little container of peanut butter that she would dip them in, and he set it out in front of her. And then he sat beside her while she ate. He didn't look at the adults near the wall. Not yet. He didn't look at the boy at the table. Not yet. He sat beside his daughter and he watched her eat, and he kept his face very calm and his voice very steady, and he asked her about the book she was reading for Library Day. He asked her whether the elephant joke was getting old or whether she thought he should retire it. He made her smile twice and almost made her laugh once. And the whole time his hands were flat on the table because if he had let them curl into fists, he wasn't sure he would have been able to uncurl them again. When lunch ended, Nathan walked Sophie back to her classroom. At the door, he hugged her. He held on a few seconds longer than usual and felt her arms tighten around his neck in the way that told him she understood something was different about today, even if she couldn't name it. "I'll see you at 3, he said. She nodded, started to go, turned back. "Dad." "Yeah, Bug. You're not going to do anything, are you?" He looked at her, 7 years old, standing in a school hallway, looking at him with his own eyes in her mother's face, asking him to protect her by doing nothing. Asking him at 7 years old to calculate the cost of her own pain against his potential trouble. "I'm going to do what's right," he said. "That's all." She studied him for a moment with that unsettling precision children have when they're deciding whether to believe you. Then she nodded once and went inside. Nathan stood in the hallway for a long moment after the door closed. Then he walked to the front office and asked to speak with the principal. The woman behind the desk told him Principal Mercer was in a meeting. Nathan told the woman behind the desk that he was happy to wait. He waited for 45 minutes. He was still there when the principal emerged from her office with the slightly surprised expression of someone who had expected him to leave. Principal Diane Mercer was a trim woman in her 50s with careful hair in the particular polished manner of someone who had navigated institutional politics long enough to make pleasantness into a defensive weapon. She shook Nathan's hand. She ushered him into her office. She offered him coffee, which he declined. She sat across the desk from him with her hands folded and her expression professionally warm, and she said, "Mr. Cole, how can I help you today?" Nathan told her what he had seen. He told it simply and factually without raising his voice, describing exactly where Sophie had been, what she had been doing, what the adults nearby had been doing, and what his daughter had said to him when she saw him in the doorway. Principal Mercer listened. She nodded. Her expression shifted through a carefully managed progression. Concern, sympathy, thoughtfulness. When he finished, she said, "I appreciate you coming in, Mr. Cole. Children's social interactions can be very complicated at this age, and I want you to know that we take the well-being of every student very seriously." Nathan looked at her. "She was on the floor," he said. "I understand this felt very distressing." "She told me not to get angry," Nathan said. "She was worried that if I said something, I would be the one who got in trouble. She's 7 years old, Principal Mercer." 7-year-olds don't think that way unless someone has already shown them that adults don't help. A very brief pause. The warmth in Principal Mercer's expression adjusted slightly. Something more careful moved in underneath it. We take all concerns seriously, she said again. I'll look into the situation and speak with the students involved. How many complaints have been made about Tyler Holloway? The room changed. It was a small change. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone watching through the window would have seen. A slight stillness in Mercer's hands. A micro shift in the angle of her chin. The warmth in her expression held perfectly in place, which was itself the tell, because warmth doesn't hold perfectly in place when it's real. Real warmth moves, real warmth responds. What Mercer had wasn't warmth anymore. It was composure. I'm not able to discuss other students. I'm not asking about other students, Nathan said. I'm asking about a pattern of behavior that my daughter has apparently been experiencing for almost 2 months. 2 months, Principal Mercer. And based on my daughter's behavior, based on the fact that she has spent 2 months deciding that telling me the truth was going to make my life harder, I don't think my daughter was the first person to walk into your office and describe a problem involving that boy. Mercer said nothing for a moment. Then she said, I understand your concern. I'll have someone follow up with you by end of week. Nathan stood up. He picked up his jacket. He looked at Diane Mercer across her desk for a long moment. I'll be in touch, he said. He walked out of the school into the afternoon and sat in his truck in the parking lot for a long time without starting the engine. He was shaking slightly, not from anger, from the effort of not showing it. His phone buzzed. Marcus asking when he'd be back. Nathan stared at the message without answering it. He was thinking about Sophie's face, the specific quality of her fear. Not the fear of a child who had experienced one bad day. The fear of a child who had learned over time that certain things were simply how the world worked, that certain people did not get stopped, that certain families did not get heard, that telling the truth was a cost you paid, not a weight someone lifted from you. I was thinking about his wife. Laura had been gone for 3 years. Laura had been quiet and brilliant and capable of carrying pain with a grace that Nathan had admired and had only understood too late. Was also a kind of damage. She had grown up learning that making other people comfortable was safer than asking for what she needed. She had spent her whole life being thoughtful and self-erasing and generous to a fault. And she had been wonderful. She had been the best person Nathan ever knew. And she had also, Nathan understood now, spent her whole life becoming smaller so that other people could feel larger. She had told him once, not long before she got sick, that she worried Sophie had inherited it. That particular instinct to absorb rather than protest. To shrink rather than demand. To say, I'm fine before anyone had a chance to ask. Nathan had told her she was being too hard on herself. That Sophie was fine. That Sophie was tough. He had said it the way men say things like that, with complete confidence and very little actual examination. He sat in the parking lot of Mesa Ridge Elementary at noon and understood for the first time that his wife had been right and he had been wrong, and that the evidence had been accumulating for 2 months in his own house and he had not seen it. Sophie coming home quieter than usual. Sophie losing her appetite on school mornings. Sophie stopping mid-conversation sometimes with a look on her face that Nathan had attributed to daydreaming and now understood was something else entirely. He had missed it. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. Then he straightened up, started the truck, put it in drive. He needed to get back to the shop. He needed to think. He needed to do both of these things without doing anything stupid in between. That evening, he made a dinner. Sophie sat at the kitchen counter the way she always did and talked about Library Day and the book she had finally decided to return and the one she was starting next. Nathan listened and asked questions and kept his voice easy and normal. And inside, he was watching her with entirely different eyes, looking at the way she held herself, looking at the careful way she monitored his face when she spoke, the slight adjustment she made in what she said based on what she read in his expression. She was managing him, 7 years old, and she was managing him, reading his moods, calibrating her words, being careful. After dinner, after homework, after the book, in the good nights, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold and finally said the thing out loud into the quiet house. How long has this been happening? He hadn't meant to say it to an empty room, but saying it helped somehow, made it real. He went to Sophie's door, knocked softly. She wasn't asleep. He'd known she wouldn't be. The light was still on under the door. Can I come in? A pause, then yeah. He sat on the edge of her bed. She was sitting up with the new book open in her lap, but she wasn't reading it. She was watching him with that careful, measuring look. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to know before I ask it that you are not in trouble. Nothing you say will upset me, and whatever you tell me, I am going to handle like a grown-up. Deal?" She thought about this. "Deal," she said, quiet. "How long?" A very long pause. "Almost 2 months," she said. Nathan breathed. "Tell me." So she did. Haltingly at first, and then faster, the way things come out when they've been held in too long, and the pressure finally exceeds what the container can hold. She told him about Tyler Holloway, about the things he said, the things he did, the way he laughed, the way the other kids laughed with him because it was safer to be with Tyler than against him. She told him about the teachers and the aides who sometimes saw and looked away. She told him about the one time she had gone to a teacher and the teacher had spoken to Tyler, and Tyler had made it worse the next day, methodically and deliberately, in a way that made it clear he had understood the complaint as an opportunity rather than a consequence. She told him she had stopped telling after that. "I didn't want it to get worse," she said. "And I thought if you knew you'd—" She stopped. "What?" Nathan asked. "What did you think I'd do?" Sophie looked at him steadily. "Get in trouble," she said. "You always get in trouble when you get angry, Dad. Mr. Prentice from down the street still doesn't wave at you." Nathan stared at his daughter. Then, despite everything, he almost laughed. "Mr. Prentice had that sprinkler running at 6 in the morning for 3 years, he said." "I know," Sophie said, "but you yelled." "I didn't yell, I spoke firmly." "Dad." "Okay, I yelled a little." Sophie almost smiled. "Almost." Nathan exhaled. He reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. "Sophie, you listening to me?" She looked at him. "You never have to become smaller just to make somebody else's life easier," he said. "Not for Tyler Holloway, not for me, not for anyone. You understand that?" She held his gaze for a long moment. "You promise you won't get in trouble," she said. "I promise I'm going to be smarter than trouble," he said. She considered this. "That's not the same thing," she said. "No," he admitted. "It's not, but it's what I've got." She lay down, let him pull the blanket up. He sat there until her breathing slowed, and then sat there a while longer listening to the quiet house around him. Then he picked up his phone and called Ray Dawson. Ray Dawson was 61 years old and had been a member of HELLS Angels for 37 of those years. He was not what most people expected when they pictured the words HELLS Angels. He was compact and quiet and given to long silences that other people made the mistake of interpreting as absence. Nathan had known him for 14 years, since before Laura died, since before Sophie was born, since before Nathan's shop was anything more than a dream. He was too tired and too broke to give up on. Ray had never once in 14 years told Nathan what to do. He had a gift for showing up at exactly the right moment and asking exactly the right question. Nathan called him at 10:30 at night and told him everything. The cafeteria, Sophie's face, the words she had whispered, the meeting with Mercer, the question about Tyler Holloway and the way the room had changed. Ray listened without speaking until Nathan was done. Then there was a silence that lasted long enough that Nathan thought the call might have dropped. "Ray, I'm here." Another pause. "I expected you to ask whether I wanted the club involved," Nathan said. "I don't care about the club right now," Ray said. "Ray, Nathan." Ray's voice was quiet and precise. "What does Sophie need?" Nathan stopped. He sat with the question, not what he needed, not what Tyler Holloway deserved, not what Principal Mercer was going to answer for. What did Sophie need? "For somebody to finally listen," Nathan said. Ray said, "Then that's where we start. Ray, I need to do this right. I need to not blow it. If I blow it, she's the one who pays for it. I know. I can't make this about me being angry, even though I am." "I know you are," Ray said. "I can hear it." "Then how do I do this?" Ray's voice, when it came, was the voice of a man who had navigated situations most people didn't survive, who had learned the hard way the difference between strength and noise. "You document everything," Ray said. "Every date, every incident, every name, everything that was said or not said. You go back through whatever you can remember and you write it down. Tomorrow you request every written record the school has. Every complaint, every communication. You make them put everything in writing from here forward, and you find out whether your daughter is the only family this has happened to." "She's not," Nathan said. "No," Ray said. "She's not. And when you find the others, you don't go to them angry. You go to them the same way you went to Sophie tonight. What way's that? Calmly, Ray said. And like you mean to stay. Nathan sat in the quiet kitchen. And if that doesn't work, he said. Ray's pause this time was different, shorter and more certain. Then you find out what does work, Ray said. But you find out the right way. Because Nathan Sophie is watching everything you do right now. Not just whether you get the result, how you get it. Nathan closed his eyes. Yeah, I know. Get some sleep, Ray said. Yeah. Nathan. Yeah. She's got the right father, Ray said, even if he yells at the neighbors. Nathan sat with the phone in his hand after the call ended and looked at the dark window across the kitchen for a long time. Then he got out a notepad and a pen. He dated the top of the first page, and he started writing everything down. Outside, the desert night was very still. Nathan Cole sat at his kitchen table and wrote, and the coffee went cold again, and the clock moved past midnight, and he didn't stop. He wrote until he had recorded every detail he could remember, every date, every change in Sophie's behavior, every unanswered question, every moment he had missed and should have caught. He wrote his daughter's words down verbatim in quotes with the date and the context. He wrote Mercer's responses down word by word, as close as he could reconstruct them. He wrote the name Tyler Holloway at the top of a separate page, and underneath it, he wrote the name Grant Holloway, because Grant Holloway was a name Nathan had not yet said out loud, but had already looked up on his phone in the parking lot of Mesa Ridge Elementary that afternoon. Grant Holloway, real estate developer, net worth estimated in the tens of millions, donor to Mesa Verde Unified School District, member of the district's Community Education Advisory Committee. Nathan looked at the name for a long time. Then he wrote underneath it in his careful, even handwriting. This was never just about Sophie. He capped the pen. He sat back. I thought about his daughter sleeping down the hall. Her shoulders finally uncurled, not managing anything, not calculating anything. Just asleep. He thought about what Ray had said. She's got the right father. Nathan, if that was true, he was about to find out. Nathan walked into Mesa Ridge Elementary the following morning with a legal pad, a pen, and 14 years of learning when to keep his mouth shut. He had not slept. Not really. He had lain in the dark, listening to the house breathe around him and running through every version of the coming conversation in his head, testing each one for the place where he would lose his temper, identifying the exact words that would make him forget Ray's instructions and say something loud and irreversible. He had found at least 6 of them. He had spent the remaining hours before dawn practicing not saying any of them. He signed in at the front desk. He asked for Principal Mercer. The woman behind the desk told him Principal Mercer was expecting him. That surprised him. He hadn't called ahead. Mercer was already standing when he was shown into her office. She had someone with him, a man Nathan hadn't seen before early 50s, wearing a jacket that was too nice for a school administrator. He stood when Nathan entered with the particular practiced ease of someone accustomed to rooms where standing means something. Mr. Cole, Mercer said, thank you for coming in. This is Mr. Patterson from the district office. Nathan looked at Mr. Patterson, then back at Mercer. You called the district office, he said. We take concerns like yours very seriously, Mercer said, and we want to make sure we're handling this with appropriate oversight. I was here yesterday afternoon, Nathan said. You told me someone would follow up with me by end of week. He paused. Today is Tuesday. A small silence. Patterson smiled pleasantly and extended his hand. Mr. Cole, I'm here to help facilitate a productive conversation. How many complaints have been filed about Tyler Holloway? Nathan said. He said it to both of them, his eyes moving from one face to the other. I'd like that in writing. Patterson's pleasant expression held. Student records are confidential. I didn't ask about a student's record. I asked about a pattern of administrative response. Those are institutional documents. I've done some reading. Another silence. Longer this time. Mr. Cole, Patterson said, I understand you're upset. Any parent would be in your situation, but I want to make sure we approach this in a way that's productive for everyone, including Sophie. Sophie, Nathan said, has been eating lunch in a state of fear for 2 months. Sophie came home every evening and did not tell me because she had decided that protecting my feelings was more important than protecting herself. Sophie is 7 years old. He set the legal pad on Mercer's desk. I want all documentation of previous complaints involving Tyler Holloway, all records of administrative responses to those complaints and a written summary of what corrective steps this school intends to take and on what timeline in writing by end of day Friday. Patterson studied him. Something shifted behind his pleasantness, a recalculation happening in real time. I'll see what we can do, Patterson said. That's not a yes, Nathan said. No, Patterson said, carefully. It's not. Nathan nodded once. He picked up his legal pad. He walked to the door and then stopped without turning around. I'm going to find out whether my daughter was the only family this happened to, he said. I don't believe she was. And if she wasn't, then this conversation will become a much larger one very quickly. I'd rather do this quietly. But I've been up all night, Mr. Patterson, and I want you to understand something. Quiet is a preference, not a requirement. He walked out. His hands were shaking by the time he reached the parking lot. Not because he was afraid, because he was furious and he had just spent 20 minutes holding it with both hands and he needed somewhere to put it now. He sat in his truck. He called Ray. Ray picked up on the second ring. They had a district administrator there, Nathan said. Already, waiting for me. A pause. How many complaints do you think there are? Enough that they made a phone call before I even left the building yesterday. Okay, Ray said. Ray, they moved faster than I expected. That means they're worried, Ray said. Worried people make mistakes. You said everything right. I think so. Good, now go to work. Let them sit with it today. A pause. And Nathan, I've got some names. Nathan went still. What kind of names? Parents, Ray said. People who might have been through something similar. I've been making some calls this morning. How did you get names already? I'm 61 years old and I've lived in this valley for 40 years, Ray said. People talk to me. Nathan gripped the steering wheel. How many? 3 families so far, Ray said. Maybe more. I want you to meet them personally, not by phone. When? This week. I'll set it up. But Nathan, you go in the same way you went in today. No anger, just listening. I know. You know, Ray agreed. Do it. Nathan drove to the shop. He went through the motions of the day, the transmission, the customer at noon, 2 more appointments in the afternoon. Marcus noticed he was quiet and had the good sense not to mention it. Nathan worked with his hands and let the work steady him, the way work always had the physical logic of engines replacing the noise in his head with something manageable. That evening at the kitchen table, he put a new piece of paper on the legal pad. He wrote at the top, "What do the other families know?" Then he waited for Friday to come. It didn't bring what he asked for. Friday arrived and brought a letter, formal 3 paragraphs signed by Patterson. It cited student privacy protections. It referenced district policy. It acknowledged Nathan's concerns and assured him the matter was receiving appropriate attention. It contained exactly 0 specific information. Nathan read it twice. Set it down, he called Ray. They stonewalled me, he said. I know, Ray said. Come Sunday, bring the letter. Sunday, Nathan said. Sunday, Ray said. There's something I need you to see. Nathan drove out to the clubhouse on Sunday morning not knowing what to expect. What he found was not what he expected. The room was quiet. That was the first thing. He had heard stories about Hell's Angels meetings. The noise, the atmosphere, the particular charged energy of a room full of men who had spent their lives operating outside other people's definitions of acceptable. What he walked into was closer to a town hall. 12 men, some of whom Nathan knew well and some only by sight, seated around a long table with coffee in front of them. Ray at the head, watching Nathan with the careful attention of a man who had brought something important into a room and was watching to see how the room received it. Nathan told them everything. He told it the same way he had told it every time. No editorializing, no performance, just facts in sequence. Sophie on the floor, the dried stain on the sweater, Mercer's composure, Patterson's pleasantness, the letter that said nothing. When he finished, nobody spoke immediately. Then a man named Hector, who had a daughter of his own in middle school, 2 districts over, said, "What do you need?" Nathan blinked. He had expected a different question. He had expected something about what they were going to do, or what they could do, or whether this was worth doing. He hadn't expected, "What do you need?" directed at him personally the way a neighbor might ask it over a fence. I need to find the other families, Nathan said, and I need them not to be alone when they decide whether to speak. Another man, Tommy Reyes, said, I know an attorney, family law, but she understands school district procedure. She did a case like this 3 years ago in Scottsdale. Nathan looked at him. Would she talk to parents who can't pay her rate? I'll ask her, Tommy said. Not I'll think about it, I'll ask her. A man named Walt, who was 68 and had been part of the club longer than Nathan had been alive, said, I've got a brother-in-law who used to work in district administration. Retired. He knows how the paperwork is supposed to run. If you want someone who can look at what they gave you and tell you what they should have given you, but didn't, he's your man. Nathan felt something shift in the room. Not toward anger, toward competence, toward the particular focused energy of people who have decided a problem is solvable and are now examining which tools they have. Ray had not said a word through any of this. He sat at the head of the table and let the room do what it was going to do. Finally, Nathan said, I need you all to understand something. If this goes wrong, if this becomes a story about Hell's Angels at a school board meeting, instead of a story about kids who weren't protected, the families lose. The moment anyone gets a photograph they can use to make this look like intimidation, we've lost. The room absorbed this. Ray spoke for the first time. Then we don't give them that photograph, he said, simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That's easy to say, Nathan. Ray's voice was level. Look around this room. Nathan looked. Every man here has had someone look at him like he was the problem, Ray said. Every man here has had someone decide what he was before he opened his mouth. We know what it looks like to be the story someone else is trying to tell about you. He paused. We're not going to be that story. We're going to be something they don't have a template for. The room was very quiet. No threats, Ray said, addressing the table now. No confrontations. No one approaches anyone who hasn't asked to be approached. We show up where we're invited. We help where we're asked. And if anyone at that table decides this isn't something they can do the right way, I need to know now. Nobody moved. Ray looked at Nathan. Find your families, he said. We'll figure out the rest. The first family Nathan found was the Garcias. Maria Garcia opened her front door and looked at Nathan for a long moment before she said anything. She was in her late 30s, tired around the eyes in a way that wasn't from one bad night. Behind her in the hallway, Nathan could see a boy of about 9 sitting very still and very straight watching the door. You're Sophie Cole's father, Maria said. Yes, Nathan said. Another long look. Then she stepped back from the door. Her son's name was Marco. He had been in the same school as Sophie the previous year before Maria had quietly, without making any formal complaint, enrolled him elsewhere. Nathan sat at Maria's kitchen table and listened to her describe the 18 months that preceded that decision. The incidents, the reports she had filed, the meetings she had attended, the language she had encountered in each of those meetings. Words like adjustment and resilience and social complexity. They never once used the word bullying, she said. In 18 months, I counted. Nathan looked up from his legal pad. Every time I came in, they had a reason why it wasn't quite that, Maria said. It was conflict. It was peer interaction. It was Marco needing to develop better coping strategies. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. My son stopped eating breakfast before school. He said his stomach hurt. His pediatrician told me it was anxiety. I took my kid to a doctor because my kid's stomach hurt every morning because he was afraid to go to school, and nobody at that school ever once said the word bullying. Was Tyler Holloway involved? Nathan asked. A pause that told him everything. Marco isn't going to talk about it, she said. I won't make him. I'm not asking him to, Nathan said. I'm asking you whether you'd be willing to be part of a group of families. Not to do anything aggressive, just to not stand alone. Maria looked at him for a long time. What does not alone mean? She said. Concretely, what does it actually mean? It means when you walk into a room, there are other people in that room who walked in for the same reason. It means your name isn't the only name on the complaint. It means you have access to an attorney pro bono who knows this district's procedures. It means if they try to tell you this is just your child, they have to explain why it's also someone else's child, and someone else's, and someone else's. Maria's eyes had gone very still. I don't want my son in the middle of anything public, she said. He won't be, Nathan said. I promise you that. You can't promise me that. No, Nathan said honestly. I can't promise you what the district does, but I can promise you what I do, and I can promise you that the people helping me understand exactly what's at stake for your family. Maria looked at him. She looked at her hands on the table. Tyler Holloway's father donated $60,000 to the district last year, she said quietly. Did you know that Nathan had known? But something about hearing it said aloud in Maria Garcia's kitchen, in the flat, precise voice of a woman who had been living with that fact for a year and a half, made it different, made it heavier. I know, he said. Then you know why I left, she said. I know why you left, Nathan said. And I know it was the right decision for Marco at the time. I'm asking you whether right now, with other families beside you, it's a different calculation. Silence. Marco's voice came from the hallway. He had moved closer without either of them noticing. He was standing at the edge of the kitchen doorway, still straight-backed, still watching. Is Sophie okay, he said. Nathan looked at the boy. She's okay, he said. She's tough. She used to sit near me at lunch, Marco said, before I left. Something in Nathan's chest pulled tight. I know, Nathan said, though he hadn't known. She's going to be okay. Marco looked at him for a moment. Then he went back down the hallway. Maria Garcia looked at the space where her son had been. Okay, she said very quietly. Tell me what you need. The second family was harder. The Petersons lived 20 minutes north. Their daughter, a girl named Emma, was still at Mesa Ridge, still going every day. Emma was 10, and Emma had not told her parents about the full extent of what had happened to her until 3 weeks ago, when her mother had found her in the bathroom at 2 a.m, sitting on the edge of the tub, crying without sound, in the particular deliberate way of a child who has practiced keeping grief quiet. Emma's mother, Jill Peterson, sat across from Nathan and held a mug of coffee she didn't drink and told him about the meeting she had attended after that night. The meeting where the assistant principal had listened with great care and then suggested that Emma might benefit from working with the school counselor on social confidence. Social confidence, Jill said. My daughter is 10 years old and she's already learned to cry without making noise, and the school's suggestion was social confidence. Nathan said nothing. He had learned that in these conversations, saying nothing was often the most important thing. My husband wanted to go to the police, Jill said. I talked him out of it, because what would we report somebody was mean to our kid? They'd tell us it was a school matter. The school would tell us they were handling it, and Emma would go back to school the next day, and Tyler Holloway would know that someone had tried to report him and nothing had happened. She paused. That's the part nobody talks about. It's not just what he does. It's that he knows nothing happens. He has learned that, Mr. Cole. He is 10 years old, and he has learned that he can do what he wants. I know, Nathan said. Do you, Jill said, not unkindly. Because I didn't know, not really, until I found my daughter in the bathroom at 2 a.m. I thought I understood how bad it was. And I was wrong. Nathan thought about the parking boss of Mesa Ridge Elementary, the moment he had understood how wrong he had been. I was wrong too, he said. Jill looked at him. Something in her face shifted, the particular shift of someone recognizing themselves in another person's admission. What happens if we do this and it doesn't work, she said. Then we've made a public record that we tried, Nathan said. And public records have a way of becoming useful later. And if it makes things worse for Emma, Nathan breathed, I won't tell you it can't. I won't make that promise. What I'll tell you is that right now Emma is already paying a price every day. And the question isn't whether this is risk-free. It's whether doing nothing is actually safer. A long silence. My husband needs to be part of this conversation, Jill said. Absolutely, Nathan said. Tell me when. The third family he almost didn't find. Ray had given him a name, a woman named Denise Carroll, whose son had been at Mesa Ridge 2 years ago. But Denise Carroll had moved and her number was changed. And when Nathan finally tracked down a mutual contact and got a message to her, she called him back, and the first thing she said was, I don't want to be involved. I understand, Nathan said. No, Denise said. You don't, because I tried. I tried the right way. I filed the complaints. I attended the meetings. I hired a lawyer for 2 months before I ran out of money. I did everything. And at the end of it, I was the problem. I was the aggressive parent. I was the one making things difficult. I was the one my son had to watch fall apart. A pause that had years inside it. We moved. Marcus is in a new school and he's doing better, and I'm not going back into that. I'm not asking you to, Nathan said. I'm not asking you to attend anything or sign anything or put your name anywhere public. Then what are you asking? I'm asking if you'd be willing to talk to a retired district administrator who wants to understand what happened and how. Privately, off the record. Silence. Why, she said. Because what happened to your son isn't a data point anymore, Nathan said. It's a pattern, and patterns have to be proven. You're not the only one. There are other families, but right now you're the one who went the furthest into the system before you got stopped. And that matters. The silence that followed lasted long enough that Nathan thought she had hung up. Then Denise Carroll said, "There was an email from the district office. I still have it." Nathan went very still. "What does it say?" he said carefully. "It says that my complaint was being handled at the building level and did not require district escalation." She paused. "The date on it is 4 days after I hand-delivered a formal written complaint to the district office directly." 4 days. Nathan looked at the wall across the room. "Mrs. Carroll," he said, "I'd like you to meet someone, a man named Walter Briggs. He's retired. He used to work in district records administration. He's been looking into how complaints like yours were supposed to be handled procedurally. And how were they supposed to be handled? Not the way they were handled," Nathan said. Another long pause. "Is any of this going to actually change something?" Denise Carroll said. "Or is it going to be like last time where I put everything into it, and at the end my kids still got hurt, and I was still the problem?" Nathan thought about Ray, about the question Ray had asked him. What does Sophie need for somebody to finally listen? "I can't promise you the outcome," Nathan said, "but I can promise you that this time you won't be walking into any room alone." Denise Carroll exhaled. "Send me this Walter Briggs's number," she said. "I'll think about it." It was not a yes, but it was not the no it had started as. And Nathan had learned in the past week that in this particular fight, the distance between those two things was exactly where everything important happened. I was driving home from the Carroll call when his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. He answered. "Mr. Cole." The voice was polished, measured, accustomed to being listened to. "My name is Richard Hale. I represent Grant Holloway." Nathan's hands tightened on the wheel. He said nothing. "I'm reaching out," Hale said, "because Mr. Holloway is genuinely concerned about the impact this situation has had on your family and on the other families involved. He feels strongly that this can be resolved in a way that benefits everyone." "What does that mean?" Nathan said. "It means Mr. Holloway is prepared to personally fund a comprehensive anti-bullying initiative for the district. New training, new resources, a significant contribution to support programs for students who've been affected." A pause. "He's also prepared to discuss a private settlement that would address any financial impact your family has experienced." Nathan let the silence run for a moment. "And in exchange," he said, "in exchange for an agreement that the matter is resolved privately," Hale said. "No further public statements, no media involvement." Nathan looked at the road ahead of him. "Tyler Holloway," he said, "is he going to be held accountable for anything in this arrangement?" A small pause. "Tyler is a child," Hale said, "and this is a matter that would be handled through the same system that already had 6 complaints and did nothing," Nathan said. "Yes, I understand." "Mr. Cole, tell Mr. Holloway thank you for his concern," Nathan said. "Tell him I'll be in touch." He ended the call. He pulled over on the side of the road and sat with both hands on the wheel and breathed. They had already counted heads. They already knew there were other families. They were moving to contain this before it could become something they couldn't contain, which meant they were afraid, and afraid people Ray had told him make mistakes. Nathan picked up the phone and called Ray. "They called me," he said. Ray was quiet for a moment. "When just now, private attorney for Grant Holloway, offering a new anti-bullying program and a settlement if I stop talking publicly." Ray made a sound that was not quite a laugh. How much, he didn't specify. "What did you say?" "I said thank you, and I hung up." A beat of silence. "Good," Ray said. "Ray, they know about the other families. They moved fast." "I know," Ray said, "which means we need to move faster." A pause. "How many families do you have?" "Do you have 3, maybe 4? There's a woman who has an email I need to get to Walter Briggs." "Get it to him," Ray said. "Tonight if you can." "And the attorney Tommy's contact." "She's in," Ray said. "I spoke with her this morning. She'll consult with anyone who needs it. Pro bono for anyone who can't pay." Nathan exhaled. "Okay." "Nathan," Ray said. "Something else." The tone in his voice made Nathan go still. "What? Your shop," Ray said. "I heard from someone this afternoon that Mesa Verde Commercial Properties is reconsidering a service contract they have with you, a maintenance contract." Nathan felt the floor of the conversation drop out. Mesa Verde Commercial Properties. One of Grant Holloway's companies. He's coming after my business, Nathan said. It looks that way, Ray said. I wanted you to know before you heard it somewhere else. Nathan sat with that for a moment. The contract was not enormous, but it was steady. It was 2 mornings a month, and it covered the gap between good months and thin months. It was the kind of contract that a small shop built its reliability on. Can he do that? Nathan said. He can, Ray said. It's legal. It's a business decision. And the rumors, there are already people saying we're threatening the school. I've heard them, Ray said. They're trying to flip the story. Yes, Ray said. They are. Nathan gripped the phone. So he's willing to come after my livelihood, Nathan said. Over this. He's willing to come after your livelihood, Ray said, which tells you exactly how worried he is. Another pause. Nathan, this is the moment they're counting on. They want you angry enough to do something they can photograph. They want one bad night to erase everything you've built. Don't give it to them. I know, Nathan said. Do you, Ray said quietly. Right now tonight, knowing what you just found out, do you still know it? Nathan breathed. He thought about Sophie. He thought about Marco Garcia sitting in the hallway asking if Sophie was okay. He thought about Emma Peterson crying without sound at 2 a.m. He thought about Denise Carroll saying I was still the problem. Yes, he said, I still know it. Good, Ray said. Now go home to your daughter. Nathan drove. The road was dark, and he drove it carefully, both hands on the wheel, and he thought about Grant Holloway sitting in some office somewhere deciding that a transmission shop and a handful of frightened families were a problem that money and pressure could solve. He thought about the way institutions work, the way they absorb complaints and redistribute cost and make it slightly more expensive each time to keep pushing until eventually most people stop. Most people. Nathan pulled into his driveway, sat in the truck for a moment. Then he went inside, checked on Sophie, kissed her forehead in the dark, and went to the kitchen table. He opened the legal pad to a fresh page. At the top, he wrote, what they want me to do. He looked at the page. Then he flipped to a new page and wrote, what I'm actually going to do. He started writing. He wrote until 2 a.m. Walter Briggs called Nathan at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning, and the first thing he said was, how fast can you get to my house? Nathan was already at the shop, first customer not due until 9. He told Marcus to hold things down, got in his truck, and drove 40 minutes north to a house in a quiet neighborhood where a 72-year-old retired district records administrator met him at the front door holding a manila folder thick enough to stop a door. Come in, Walter said, and bring your notepad. Walter Briggs was not what Nathan had imagined. He was slight and methodical and spoke the way people speak when they have spent decades in rooms where precision matters more than personality. He had white hair and reading glasses on a chain around his neck, and the particular careful stillness of a man who had spent his career watching institutions handle truth, the way people handle inconvenient furniture, not destroying it, just moving it where nobody would trip over it. He set the folder on the kitchen table and opened it. 22 months, Walter said. That's how far back the documentation goes. Not just your daughter, not just the Garcia boy or the Peterson girl. 7 distinct families, 7 sets of complaints filed through proper channels, documented in writing, acknowledged in writing, and then, and this is the part that matters, redirected. Nathan looked at the papers. Redirected how? Every formal complaint that came in about Tyler Holloway was logged initially at the building level, which is standard procedure. The issue is what happened next. District policy requires that any complaint involving repeated behavioral incidents be escalated to district administration within 10 business days if resolution has not been documented at the building level. Walter tapped one page, then another. In every single case involving this particular student, that escalation did not happen. They buried them, Nathan said. That word implies intent, Walter said carefully. What I can tell you is that the procedural requirement was not followed, repeatedly, in a pattern, across multiple years, and the families who attempted to escalate directly to the district, he pulled a sheet from further in the folder, were sent back to the building level with a form letter. Nathan stared at the form letter. It was dated 18 months ago. The name at the bottom of it was Patterson's. The same man who was in Mercer's office when I came in, Nathan said. Yes, Walter said. Nathan sat back in his chair. Walter, he said, why are you doing this? You're retired. You don't have a dog in this fight. Walter looked at him for a moment. He took his glasses off the chain and put them on and looked down at the folder and then looked back up. I have a granddaughter, he said. She's 4. She's going to go to school in this district in 2 years. He paused. And I spent 31 years in that system watching things get papered over because the paperwork was easier than the fix. I didn't say anything loud enough when I should have. He closed the folder. I'm saying it now. Nathan put his hand on the folder. Can I have copies of all of this? I made them last night, Walter said. He slid a second folder across the table. Every document in there was obtained through legitimate public records requests or through my own files from my time of service. Nothing here is stolen. Nothing here is confidential. Everything here is exactly what it appears to be. Nathan looked at the second folder, then at Walter. There's someone I want you to meet, Nathan said. A journalist named Claire Bennett. She's based in Phoenix. She does investigative work. I know who Claire Bennett is, Walter said. Would you be willing to talk to her? Walter looked at the folder, at Nathan, at something in the middle distance that wasn't either of them. Yes, he said, but on my terms, my timeline, and she sees the documents first before any conversation. I'll tell her, Nathan said. He drove back to the shop with 2 folders on the passenger seat and the particular sensation of a man who has been digging for a week and has just hit something solid. He called Ray from the parking lot. Walter Briggs has documentation going back 22 months, Nathan said. 7 families, a procedural pattern that is going to be very difficult for the district to explain. A pause, then Ray said, Does Walter understand what comes next? He does. He's ready. Good, because Nathan, Ray stopped. What? Claire Bennett called me this morning before you. Nathan went still. What did she say? She'd already heard, Ray said. Not from us, from a source inside the district. Someone who saw the Patterson letter and made a call. She's already working the story. She's been working it for 4 days, Ray said. She was waiting to see if we were serious. Nathan exhaled. Are we serious? That's what she wanted to know, Ray said. I told her to call you. Claire Bennett called at noon. She was direct and fast and spoke the way people speak when their brain runs slightly ahead of their mouth and they've made peace with it. Mr. Cole, I've been looking into Mesa Verde Unified for 3 weeks. I had a tip from a district employee about complaint suppression going back at least 2 years. I have 2 sources, neither of whom will go on record. What do you have? Documentary evidence, Nathan said. 7 families. A retired administrator who will go on record. 3 families who will give interviews. A pause that lasted exactly 3 seconds. When can we meet, she said. You tell me, Nathan said. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Bring everything. Nathan brought everything. Claire Bennett sat across a conference table from him and Walter Briggs for 3 hours, and she read every document twice. And she asked questions that were precise and uncomfortable and occasionally aimed at weaknesses in the record that Nathan hadn't seen until she pointed at them. She was not warm. She was not performing concern. She was a woman who had spent 15 years separating real stories from stories that wanted to be real, and the way she read the folder told Nathan she knew the difference. At the end of 3 hours, she sat back and said, This is real. I know it's real, Nathan said. I mean, it's documentable, she said, which is different. A lot of real things aren't documentable. This is, she looked at Walter. You'll go on camera. Yes, Walter said. And the families. Nathan thought about Maria Garcia, about Jill and Dave Peterson, who had finally sat together at their kitchen table and agreed. About Denise Carroll, who had sent Walter the email and then called Nathan the next day and said quietly, I'm in. But if my son gets hurt by this, I will never forgive you. Nathan had said, if your son gets hurt by this, I'll never forgive myself. 3 families confirmed, he said, possibly 4. Claire nodded once. I need 2 more weeks to independently verify the documentary record. I will not air anything I can't stand behind, with 2 independent sources, minimum. But if everything checks out, she looked at Nathan steadily. This becomes a very significant story, Mr. Cole. I need you to understand what that means. For you, for the families, for the children. I understand, Nathan said. Do the families understand? I'm going to make sure they do, Nathan said, before anything airs. Good, she stood, extended her hand. I'll be in touch. Nathan shook it. He walked out of that building with Walter Briggs beside him and stood in the morning air and felt the specific weight of a situation that had just become too large to go backward from. You okay? Walter asked. I don't know yet, Nathan said honestly. Walter nodded. That's probably the right answer. They were 4 days from the board meeting when the phone call started. Not to Nathan, to the other families. Maria Garcia called him at 8 in the evening. Her voice controlled in the way of someone keeping it controlled deliberately. Someone from the district called me today, she said. A woman I've never spoken to. She said she wanted to discuss Marco's enrollment and whether the school he's currently in is meeting his needs. She said there were some things she wanted to make sure I was aware of regarding transitions back to district schools. Nathan gripped the phone. What did you tell her? I told her Marco was doing fine and I'd be in touch if I needed anything, Maria said. And then I called you. They're fishing, Nathan said. They want to know if you'll break. I know what they're doing, Maria said, an edge coming into her voice. I've been doing this longer than you have, Mr. Cole. You're right, Nathan said. I'm sorry. A breath. Will it stop after the meeting? Nathan thought about the honest answer. I don't know, he said. But after the meeting, it won't matter as much. After the meeting, there'll be a record. And a record is a lot harder to make phone calls against. Jill Peterson called an hour later. 2 parents had approached her husband Dave at his workplace, not Holloway's people, just community members who had heard things. Heard that Hell's Angels was going to the school board meeting, heard that it was going to turn into something ugly. Dave's boss called him into his office, Jill said, just to check in, just to make sure Dave knew what he was getting into. What did Dave say? He said he knew exactly what he was getting into, Jill said, and then he came home and told me we're going. Nathan felt something in his chest release slightly. Tell Dave thank you. Tell him yourself at the meeting, Jill said. He'll want to shake your hand. The rumors about Hell's Angels were accelerating. Nathan heard 3 different versions in 3 days that the club was planning to surround the school board building, that they were going to intimidate district officials, that Ray Dawson had personally threatened someone. None of which was true and all of which was spreading through the community with the efficient enthusiasm of a story that confirms what people already believe. He called Ray. The rumors he started. I know, Ray said. Let them run. Ray, they were going to show up to that meeting expecting a circus, and when they see, Ray said, they'll see something they didn't expect. That's better than us trying to argue against a rumor. You can't fight a story with a denial. You fight a story with a different story. And what's our story? Show up and let them find out, Ray said. Ray, how many people are coming? A pause. I stopped counting at 60, Ray said. Nathan's mouth went dry. 60 members. Members' friends, families, people who heard and asked if they could come. Tommy's attorney confirmed she'll be there with printed handouts on complaint procedures for any parent who wants them. Walt's brother-in-law is coming with a summary of district procedural requirements. 1-page, plain language something any parent can read and understand. And a man named Gerald, who has a restaurant 2 miles from the district building, has offered to set up coffee and food in the parking lot for anyone who's waiting outside because the room fills up. Nathan sat with all of this for a moment. None of them are going to do anything, and he said. They're going to do exactly what I said, Ray said. Show up, stand beside people. Be impossible to pretend aren't there. Grant Holloway's seat is going to be empty, Nathan said. He didn't know this for certain, but he felt it the way you feel things that are true before you can prove them. Probably, Ray said. Why? Because men like Grant Holloway know how to put their name on a check and call it courage, Ray said. Actually sitting in a room where people are telling the truth about what his money bought, that's a different thing. Nathan thought about that. Ray, he said, what are you going to say at the meeting? If they ask you to speak. A pause that stretched long enough to feel considered. I'll know when I get there, Ray said. The morning of the board meeting, Nathan woke at 5 and lay in the dark for an hour without moving. I was not afraid of the meeting. He had passed afraid somewhere in the previous 2 weeks and come out the other side into something quieter and more resolute that didn't have a clean name. He was thinking about Laura. He thought about her most on mornings when something large was happening, as though the largeness of the day created enough gravity to pull her presence back into the room. She would have done this differently, he thought. Laura would have been more patient, more precise. She would have built her case over months and filed it in perfect order and spoken to every person in exactly the right register. But she also would have been alone. That was the thing Nathan understood that morning in the dark. Laura carried things alone because she had never believed that asking for help was something she was entitled to do. She had never believed that the burden she was carrying was significant enough to ask someone else to share it. Sophie had inherited that, and Nathan had almost let her keep it. He got up, he made coffee, he went to Sophie's door and listened to her breathing for a moment, then went back to the kitchen. He wrote one more page in the legal pad. Not notes, not documentation, just the things he wanted to say. He wrote them simply the way he would say them, no performance, no prepared eloquence. Just what he had seen, what it had meant, what he needed the people in that room to understand. He read it back once. Then he put the pad down, finished his coffee, and went to wake Sophie. She was already awake, sitting up in bed with the book in her lap, watching the door like she had known he was coming. "Today's the meeting," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at him carefully. "Are you scared?" "A little," he said. She seemed to appreciate the honesty. "Me too," she said. He sat on the edge of the bed. "You don't need to be scared, Bug. You're not going to be in that room." "I know," she said. "But you are." Nathan looked at his daughter. "I'm going to be okay," he said. "I know," she said again. I want them to listen. I want someone to actually listen for once." Nathan reached out and put his hand on top of hers. "They're going to listen," he said. "How do you know?" "Because this time," Nathan said, "we're not walking in alone." "Oseo." He turned onto the road leading to the district building at 6:40 in the evening, 20 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to start, and he saw the motorcycles. Not dozens, more than dozens. They were parked legally, correctly, several blocks back from the building, in two long, orderly rows that stretched further than Nathan could see in the early dark. Men in club cuts standing beside them, talking quietly, some drinking coffee from paper cups. No signs, no shouting, no theater. Just people who had decided to be present and were being present with a discipline that Nathan felt in his own chest like something physical. He pulled over and got out of his truck, and Ray was already there, hands in the pockets of his jacket, watching the road with the expression of a man who has done what he set out to do and is waiting to see what comes next. Nathan stood beside him. "How many?" Nathan said. "Buildings at capacity," Ray said. "There are people outside who will stand outside the whole meeting. They know they might not get in. They came anyway." Nathan looked down the line of motorcycles. "They drove here knowing they might stand outside in the dark for 2 hours," he said. "Some of them drove 2 hours to get here," Ray said. Nathan didn't say anything for a moment. He wasn't sure he could. "There are families in there," Ray said. "Ours and others. People who heard and came because they wanted to be in the room. Older people, younger people, teachers a few. One woman told me she came because she was bullied in school 40 years ago, and nobody came for her, and she wasn't going to let it happen to someone else's kid in her community." Nathan breathed. "Ray," he said, "you built this in 2 weeks." "No," Ray said. "This was already here. I just told people where to show up." They walked to the building together. Inside, every seat was filled. Nathan found the Peterson family near the front. Dave Peterson stood when he saw Nathan and crossed the room and shook his hand without saying anything, which was better than anything he could have said. Maria Garcia was there with a woman Nathan didn't recognize, who turned out to be her sister. Denise Carroll was in the third row back straight, hands folded, looking at the board table with the expression of someone who had waited a long time for this seat. Walter Briggs was in the second row with a folder on his lap. Tommy's attorney was near the wall, already distributing one-page summaries to parents who wanted them. Grant Holloway's seat, he had held a position on the community advisory panel that traditionally sat adjacent to the board at public meetings, was empty. Nathan had known it would be. The board chair called the meeting to order. She was a woman named Catherine Holt, mid-60s, with the measured authority of someone accustomed to running contentious rooms. She looked out at the packed house with an expression that was professional and composed, and Nathan thought slightly shaken. The shaken part buried under the professional part, but there if you were looking for it. Public comment began. Nathan went to the microphone first. He did not read from the legal pad. He had decided that in the truck on the way over, that reading from notes would put a layer of paper between him and the people he needed to reach, and paper was easy to dismiss. He stood at the microphone and he looked at the board and he told them what he had seen. His blonde-haired daughter on her knees on a cafeteria floor picking food from the tile. The dried stain on the yellow sweater. The adults nearby who looked away. The laugh of a boy who had never once worried about consequences. And then he told them the sentence that had started everything. "Dad, please don't get angry. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me." He let that sit in the room for a moment. My daughter is 7 years old, he said. She spent 2 months deciding that protecting me was more important than protecting herself. She learned that from somewhere. She learned it because every time she or someone like her tried to tell an adult what was happening, the adult found a reason not to act. She learned it because the system that was supposed to protect her taught her very efficiently and very thoroughly that the truth was a cost you paid, not a weight someone lifted from you. He paused, looked down the board table. I am not here because I want anyone punished, he said. I am here because my daughter deserves to eat lunch without fear. And so do the other children who have been eating lunch in fear for the past 2 years, while this district processed their families' complaints in circles. He stepped back from the microphone. The room was very quiet. Then Joe Peterson went up. Then Maria Garcia. Then Denise Carroll, who stood at the microphone with 2 years of suppressed clarity in her voice, and said calmly and precisely and without a tremor that she had filed a formal complaint at the district level, delivered it by hand, received a form letter in return 4 days later, and watched her son come home from school, afraid for 18 months while that letter sat in a file somewhere. Walter Briggs presented the documentation. He did not editorialize. He read dates and procedural requirements and outcomes in the flat, precise voice of a man who had spent 3 decades in rooms where precision was the only currency that mattered. He explained what the procedure was supposed to be. He explained what the procedure had been. He let the gap between those two things speak for itself. The room was so quiet by the end of Walter's statement that Nathan could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. Then the board chair looked at her colleagues. A look passed between them, the specific look of people who understand that the thing they were hoping would stay manageable has just ceased to be manageable. The chair would like to, she started, and then Ray Dawson walked to the microphone. The room shifted, not dramatically, just the particular subtle atmospheric change that happens when a room full of people simultaneously recalibrates who it's watching. Ray Dawson was not a large man. He was compact and quiet and wore his club cut over a collared shirt, which was the only concession he had made to the formality of the room. He stood at the microphone for a moment without speaking, looking at the board table with calm, dark eyes. Several board members, Nathan noticed, were looking back at him with varying degrees of visible discomfort. That was what they'd been waiting for, the moment that confirmed the story they'd been prepared to tell. The angry biker. The intimidation. The photograph. Ray gave them none of it. My name is Ray Dawson, Arnie said. I've lived in this valley for 40 years. I have grandchildren in this state. I am not here to threaten anyone in this room. He paused. I want to ask one question, he said. And I want the board to sit with it because I don't think it needs an answer tonight. It needs to be thought about. He looked down the table. These families came to you, he said. Some of them came more than once. Some of them came 4 and 5 and 6 times. They did what you're supposed to do. They told the truth to the people who were supposed to listen. And they were redirected and minimized and told to be more resilient, and they left those meetings smaller than when they came in. He paused. We are not here asking you to fear us. We are asking something much simpler than that. He looked at the board chair. We are asking why children had to fear telling you the truth. The silence that followed was the loudest silence Nathan had ever been in. It lasted long enough to mean something. Then the board chair looked at her colleagues again, and then she looked back at the room. The board will recess briefly, she said, and then we will return to address this matter. The recess lasted 11 minutes. When Catherine Holt returned to the table, she had the expression of a woman who has had 11 minutes to understand something that should have taken significantly less time. The board is going to commission an independent investigation into complaint handling procedures within Mesa Verde Unified School District, she said. The scope of that investigation will include all formal complaints filed in the past 3 years, the administrative responses to those complaints, and whether district protocols were followed. The investigation will be conducted by an external party with no existing relationship to this district. She paused. We recognize that these families deserve better. That is where this board needs to start. It was not everything. Nathan knew it wasn't everything. Real accountability would take months of work that started in that room, but would not end there. But it was the thing he had come for: a public record, a stated commitment, a room full of witnesses. He looked at Denise Carroll. She was looking at the board table and her jaw was tight and her eyes were bright, and she was not crying, which Nathan understood was an act of will. He looked at Maria Garcia. She had her hand over her mouth. He looked at Dave and Jill Peterson, sitting with their hands linked between them. He looked at Walter Briggs, who nodded once precisely and put his folder on the empty chair beside him. Nathan stepped outside. He needed air. He needed 20 seconds of not being looked at. He stood outside the building, and the night air came in off the desert, and he breathed it. From blocks away, he could see the line of motorcycles, the men standing beside them, the glow of Gerald's coffee setup at the edge of the parking lot. People who had stood outside in the dark for 2 hours because they decided someone else's children were worth 2 hours of their evening. His phone buzzed. "Claire Bennett," he answered. "The investigation airs in 3 hours," she said. "We moved the time slot. Are you watching?" "I might be busy," Nathan said. "You should watch," she said. "It's going to be something." A pause. "Mr. Cole, you did good work." Nathan looked at the motorcycles, at the people, at the night. "We all did," he said. He went back inside. Ray was standing near the door, coffee in hand, watching the room slowly empty, with the expression of a man who has delivered something he promised and is already thinking about the next thing. Nathan stood beside him. "She doesn't apologize for needing help anymore," Nathan said. I wasn't sure why he said it. It was just what was in his head. Ray looked at him. "Sophie. She called me this afternoon before I came here, asked how I was feeling." Nathan paused. Not whether I was going to be okay. How I was feeling, like she had space to ask. Ray looked at him for a moment. "That's the whole thing," Ray said quietly. "Right there, that's what this was for." Outside somewhere in the parking lot, someone started a motorcycle. Then another. Then the sound grew rolling through the night, and it wasn't threatening. It was just the sound of a lot of people going home, back to their lives, having done one thing right with one evening. Nathan Cole stood in the doorway and listened to them go. Claire Bennett's investigation aired at 11 o'clock that night, and by midnight, Nathan's phone had stopped being a phone and become something else entirely, a device that vibrated continuously on the kitchen table while he sat beside it and didn't pick it up. I had watched the broadcast once. Sitting on the couch with Sophie asleep against his shoulder, her weight warm and real and grounding, in a way that nothing else in the room was. Claire's team had done exactly what she promised, clean, precise, documented. Walter Briggs on camera measured and irrefutable. The paper trail laid out in language clear enough for anyone to follow. Two of the family's faces shown, names given, speaking in the direct and exhausted voices of people who have stopped being afraid of being believed because someone finally believed them. Nathan had not cried during it. He had sat very still and felt something he couldn't name move through him. Not relief exactly, not victory, something more complicated than either. The specific sensation of a weight you've been carrying so long you forgot it was there, being lifted enough that the absence of it feels strange. Sophie had slept through the whole thing. When it ended, he turned the television off and sat in the dark for a while, and then carried her to bed and came back and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the phone. 47 missed calls, more texts than he could count, 3 voicemails from numbers he didn't recognize. He called Ray. Ray picked up on the first ring, which meant Ray had been awake, which meant Ray had watched. "You saw it," Nathan said. "I saw it," Ray said. "It was good," Nathan said. "It was better than good," Ray said. "It was clean. She did the work." A pause between them, the comfortable kind. "The phone hasn't stopped," Nathan said. "Mine either," Ray said. "Media, parents from other districts, a couple of school board members from places I've never heard of." "What do you tell them?" "Same thing I always tell people," Ray said. "Talk to Nathan Cole. He's the one who started it." Nathan looked at the dark window. "I don't want to be the one who started it. I want to be the one whose daughter eats lunch without fear." "Those two things aren't separate anymore," Ray said. "You know that." Nathan knew that. "I went to bed at 2 in the morning. He lay in the dark for a long time. He thought about Grant Holloway somewhere in a house much larger than this one, watching his name attached to words like donor influence and procedural suppression on a television screen. He thought about Richard Hale, the attorney who had called him with the settlement offer, recalculating everything right now. He thought about Principal Mercer and Patterson and the form letter with the date on it that was 4 days after Denise Carroll's hand-delivered complaint. He did not feel triumphant. He had expected to feel triumphant, and instead he felt tired and something that was almost like grief, which made no sense until he thought about it long enough to understand. He was grieving the version of events where none of this had been necessary. where Tyler Holloway had been stopped by the first adult who saw what he was doing, where Sophie had never learned to cry quietly, where Laura had lived long enough to watch Sophie grow up without that particular learned smallness in her shoulders. I was grieving the world that should have existed, the one where 7 families hadn't had to spend 2 years making themselves heard. He fell asleep thinking about that, and he dreamed about Laura, which was unusual. He rarely dreamed about her anymore. And in the dream, she was sitting across the kitchen table from him, and she wasn't sad and she wasn't sick, and she was just looking at him with that particular expression she had, the one that meant she was 3 steps ahead of him and was deciding how much she wanted to admit it. "You did okay," she said in the dream. "I missed it for 2 months," he said. "Yes," she said, "and then you didn't." He woke up at 6. Sophie was already in the kitchen making toast in the particular ambitious and slightly dangerous way she approached all kitchen tasks. He stood in the doorway watching her and felt the day already pressing in from all sides, the calls to return the investigation that was only beginning, the weeks and months of institutional process that followed a public moment like last night's, and were always harder and quieter and less dramatic than the moment itself. "You're watching me," Sophie said without turning around. "I'm making sure you don't burn the house down," he said. "I know how to make toast, Dad." The smoke detector disagrees. She turned around and looked at him with a piece of barely charred bread in her hand. "That was 1 time. 3 times. Twice. 3, he said. "The second time you hid the evidence." She almost smiled. He could see the corners of it. She turned back to the counter and he went to the coffee maker, and they moved around the kitchen in the easy choreography of 2 people who have shared a small space long enough to know each other's patterns. And Nathan thought this. This is what last night was for. Not the cameras, not the board vote. This kitchen, this particular 7-year-old making toast like she owns the world. His phone rang. He looked at it. A number he recognized, Claire Bennett. "I'll be right back," he told Sophie. He stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Cole," Claire said, "we have 47,000 views on the broadcast video as of 6 this morning. The story has been picked up by 3 national outlets. And 20 minutes ago, I received a call from an attorney representing Grant Holloway." She paused. "He wants to negotiate." Nathan leaned against the hallway wall. Negotiate what? An on-camera statement from Holloway, taking personal responsibility for the influence his donations had on how complaints were handled, voluntary resignation from all district advisory positions, and a substantial financial contribution not to Nathan Cole but to an independent family advocacy fund that would be administered by a board that includes community representatives. Nathan processed this. "Why is he offering this now?" Nathan said. "The investigation just started." "Because his attorneys have seen our documentary record," Claire said. "And because 2 more families contacted us last night after the broadcast. Families we hadn't found yet." She paused. "One of them has a recording." Nathan straightened. "What kind of recording?" "A voicemail," Claire said, "from Patterson, left on a mother's phone 8 months ago, advising her that pursuing her complaint further would be—" Claire paused, and the pause itself was significant. The pause of a journalist choosing her words with professional precision, inadvisable, given the community relationships involved. The hallway was very quiet. "He told a parent to back down," Nathan said. "On a voicemail," Claire said, "that she saved." Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. There it was, not administrative failure, not procedural oversight, not the complicated gray area of institutional dysfunction. A voice, a specific human voice telling a specific frightened parent that the community relationships involved made pursuing the truth inadvisable. "What happens now?" Nathan said. "Now," Claire said, "this moves beyond the school board. I've already been contacted by the state education department. And Nathan—" Her voice shifted slightly, still professional, but something underneath it. Something that might in a different person have been called feeling. "You should know. Holloway's attorney called us at 5:40 this morning, before the national pickup, before the 2 new families. He was already calling." "Which means he didn't sleep either," Nathan said. "Which means his lawyers were watching last night, and they saw something that couldn't be managed," Claire said. "They saw a room full of people who weren't going away." Nathan breathed. "Tell his attorney I'll speak with my people first," Nathan said. "Before anyone negotiates anything, the families need to know what's on the table. This isn't my decision to make alone." "I'll tell him," Claire said. "Sayishamam." For what it's worth, Mr. Cole, you handled this exactly right. Nathan went back to the kitchen. Sophie had finished her toast and was eating it at the counter with a book propped against the fruit bowl, reading with the complete absorption of someone who has left the room without moving. Nathan poured his coffee and sat across from her and watched her read. She looked up. "What? Nothing," he said. "Just watching you." She looked at him for a moment with that careful, measuring look she had. "Something happened," she said. "Good things," he said. "Complicated good things." She considered this. "Is it over?" Nathan looked at his daughter. "The loud part might be," he said. "The important part takes longer." She nodded slowly, the way children nod when they're accepting information they've decided to trust. Then she went back to her book. Nathan drank his coffee and thought about everything ahead of them. He called the families before he called anyone else. Maria Garcia first. He told her about Holloway's offer. He told her about the voicemail. He told her exactly what Claire had told him without softening and without editorializing. Maria was quiet through all of it, and then she said, "What do you think?" "I think the offer is real," Nathan said. "I think they're scared enough that it's genuine, but I think the families need to decide together what real accountability looks like to them. Not what's convenient, not what closes it fastest." "I don't want money," Maria said. "I never wanted money. I wanted someone to say it shouldn't have happened. On record, where it can't be taken back." "That might be part of what's on the table," Nathan said. "Might isn't enough," Maria said. "No," he agreed, "it's not." He called Jill Peterson. Dave answered, his voice still carrying the particular residue of someone who had been up most of the night, being recognized by people who'd seen him on television. He was gracious about it, in the slightly dazed way of people for whom recognition is genuinely new. "Tell me about the voicemail," Dave said after Nathan had gone through everything. Nathan told him. The silence that followed lasted long enough that Nathan thought about filling it. He didn't. Patterson called a parent and told her the community relationships involved made her complaint inadvisable. Dave said finally in a voice that was very flat and very controlled, "That's what he said. That's what he said." On a voicemail that she saved for 8 months. "Yes." Another silence. "Then Jill needs to hear this. Hold on." Nathan listened to the sound of the Peterson house in the background. A door, footsteps, Jill's voice asking something, Dave saying, "Hold on, just come here for a minute." Then Jill on the line. Nathan told it again. When he got to the voicemail, she made a sound that was not quite a word. 8 months, Jill said. "Yes." She held on to it for 8 months. She didn't know if it would matter, Nathan said. She didn't know if anyone was going to listen. Another silence. When Jill spoke again, her voice was different, tighter, more compressed, the voice of someone holding something large in a small space. "What do we need to do?" "I'm calling everyone together," Nathan said. "All the families, Walter, Tommy's attorney, this week if we can, before anyone responds to Holloway's offer. Before anyone talks to anyone on the record. We sit in a room together and we decide what we need this to look like when it's done." "When do you want to meet?" Jill said. "Saturday," Nathan said. "Can you make Saturday?" "We'll be there," Jill said. He called Denise Carroll last. He had been saving her for last, and he knew why Denise Carroll was the one who had been furthest into the system before she was stopped, the one who had paid the highest price and recovered the most slowly, and he needed to be at his clearest and most honest when he spoke to her. She answered on the third ring. "I saw the broadcast," she said before he could speak, "and I saw the national pickup this morning. Marcus came in and showed me on his phone before school." A pause. "He said to tell you thank you." Nathan felt something move through his chest. "Tell him he's the one who matters," Nathan said. "I did," she said. "He said he knows." Another pause. "What's coming next?" Nathan told her everything. The offer, the voicemail, his plan for Saturday. When he finished, Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay," Nathan said. "When this is done," she said, "when the investigation concludes and the resignations happen and the new policies get written up and everyone moves on, is any of it going to stick? Or is it going to be the kind of thing that gets impressive at the beginning and then quietly goes back to how it was?" Nathan sat with that question. It was the right question. It was the question he had been asking himself in the hours since the board meeting. In the dark after the broadcast in the kitchen this morning over cold coffee, "I don't know," he said, a breath. "At least you didn't lie to me." "I can tell you what I think," Nathan said. I think the only way any of it sticks is if the people in this community keep watching. Keep showing up. Don't let it become a story that ended. He paused. That's not a guarantee. It's a commitment. And it's not a commitment I can make for everyone. It's one you have to decide whether you're willing to make for yourself. Silence. Saturday, Denise said. I'll be there. And Nathan. She stopped. Seemed to be deciding something. Bring Walter Briggs. I want to talk to him about what sustainable oversight actually looks like in a district like this. Not the dramatic version. The boring version. The version that keeps working in 5 years when nobody's watching. Nathan almost smiled. I'll bring him. Good on, she said. See you Saturday. Damn. The Saturday meeting happened in the back room of Gerald's restaurant, the same man who had provided coffee outside the board meeting. He had given them the space for free and put out lunch for everyone, which was the kind of thing that Nathan was still learning to receive gracefully. Generosity from people who had no particular stake in the outcome, except that they had decided the outcome mattered. 12 people around the table. The families, Walter Briggs, Tommy's attorney, whose name was Renata Flores, and Ray. Nathan had asked Ray to come not because he needed him there, but because Ray's presence in a room had a particular effect. It slowed things down to the right speed, kept the temperature at the right level, made people feel that whatever they said would be heard without being judged. Renata Flores laid out the legal landscape with the clean efficiency of someone who had done this before and understood that people in these situations needed clarity more than they needed to be impressed. She explained what the independent investigation could and could not compel. She explained what district policy changes would require. She explained the legal difference between a negotiated settlement with an attached public statement and a documented finding from an independent investigation, and why that difference mattered significantly for the permanence of the record. Holloway's offer, she said, is genuinely more than I expected. The on-camera statement is meaningful. The advocacy fund is real money with real infrastructure. But I want to be clear, she looked around the table. What you accept or reject here shapes what the permanent record says. If you settle before the investigation concludes, the investigation concludes. If you let the investigation run its full course, the findings are documented by an independent party and become public record regardless of what any individual party agrees to. And Holloway can't stop the investigation regardless, Maria Garcia said. He cannot, Renata said. The board commissioned it. He is not on the board. Then why do we need to decide anything about his offer right now, Dave Peterson said. We don't, Renata said. That's exactly my point. A ripple went around the table. Nathan watched the families absorb this, the specific recalibration of people who had been so focused on the pressure of responding that they hadn't fully clocked their option not to. We let the investigation run, Denise Carroll said, and then we see what the findings are, and then we decide what a settlement looks like in light of those findings. Yes, Renata said, and Holloway, Denise paused. He can resign from the advisory positions regardless. He can do that tomorrow if he wants. That doesn't need to be part of a negotiation. No, Renata agreed, it doesn't. Walter Briggs, who had been quiet through most of this, in the way he was often quiet absorbing filing, waiting for the right moment, spoke now. I want to say something about the policy changes, he said, because I've seen cycles like this before. Investigation concludes, findings are released, administration changes, new policies get written. And then 2 years later, the new administration is working around the new policies because the policies were written in reaction to a specific case rather than designed to prevent the category of failure. He looked around the table. What needs to happen in this district, he said, is the creation of an independent complaint review function that sits outside the building and outside the district office. A body with genuine authority to investigate and genuine accountability to report. Not an ombudsman position that can be quietly defunded in 3 years. Something structural. Something that would require a public vote to remove. Silence. That's a bigger ask than anything else on the table, Nathan said. Yes, Walter said, it is. But it's the right ask, Denise Carroll said quietly. It's the ask that makes the rest of it mean something, Walter said. In 10 years, when none of us are watching as closely as we're watching right now. Nathan looked at Ray. Ray was looking at Walter Briggs with the expression of a man recognizing something he respects. Can we get there? Nathan asked Renata. It would require a board vote, Renata said. which is harder than a policy change, but she paused. The board that voted for this investigation just watched 60 people show up to a meeting on a weeknight. They know those people are still there. That's leverage if you use it correctly. How do we use it correctly? Maria Garcia said. You show up again, Renata said simply. You don't disappear after the first win. You come back to every meeting where this agenda item appears. You bring the same people. You stay engaged for the year it takes to get a board vote. And you make it absolutely clear to every board member that this community is watching whether they follow through. A long quiet. Then Dave Peterson said, Are we all doing that? He looked around the table. Maria Garcia said, I'm doing that. Denise Carroll nodded once without hesitation. Jill Peterson reached over and took her husband's hand. Nathan said, I'm doing that. Ray said nothing. He just sat with his coffee and nodded in the way of someone who had never considered not doing it. The investigation took 4 months. Nathan had prepared himself for that. Ray had told him at the start that real change doesn't arrive as one dramatic victory, and Nathan had believed him in principle. But principle and practice are different weights, and living through 4 months of institutional process was harder than understanding it abstractly. There were weeks when nothing appeared to move. Weeks when the investigation seemed to have gone silent in the way that institutional processes go silent, not because nothing is happening, but because what is happening in rooms. Nathan wasn't in. He would wake up some mornings with the specific anxiety of a man who has pushed something very large and cannot see whether it's still moving. He called Renata on those mornings. She was patient with him in the direct, slightly impatient way of someone who is patient on principle but would prefer not to be. She would tell him what she knew, which was usually that things were progressing as expected, and remind him that progressing as expected was not nothing, and he would hang up slightly steadier and go to work. The shop had stabilized. The Mesa Verde commercial properties contract had not been renewed as Ray had warned him. But 3 other things had happened that Nathan had not expected. 2 new commercial accounts came in businesses in the community who had seen the broadcast and without announcing it, redirected work to Nathan's shop. A local automotive parts supplier extended him a preferred pricing arrangement without being asked. And Marcus, his assistant, had started turning down after-hours freelance work and instead spending those evenings helping Nathan organize the Open Table project, which was the thing Nathan had started working on quietly in the 4th week after the board meeting when he needed something to do with his hands that wasn't waiting. The Open Table project had started as a name in a notebook, an idea, the shape of something. He had taken it to Ray, and Ray had looked at it for a long time without saying anything and then said, it needs a table, which Nathan had not understood immediately. An actual table, Ray had said, where families sit, not a hotline, not a website, a table, in a room with people at it. So that's what they built, a monthly meeting open to any family in the district where parents could sit with Renata Flores or Walter Briggs or Nathan himself and ask questions and receive information and understand what resources they had access to. Not a legal clinic, not a complaint service, just people in a room being available. The first meeting had 8 families, the second had 19. By the 4th month, the building Gerald lent them wasn't large enough and they moved to the community center. Ray had shaken his head at the 4th meeting, looking at the room. You built something, he told Nathan. We built something, Nathan said. No, Ray said. You built something, I showed up. That's different. Nathan had disagreed with this, and they had argued about it pleasantly for several minutes, which was unusual. Ray rarely engaged in pleasant arguments, and Nathan understood this meant Ray was in a good mood, which was its own kind of victory. The investigation concluded on a Thursday morning in March. Renata called Nathan first before the public release because she had a source, and because she thought he deserved not to find out from a news alert. It's significant, she said. The findings document 18 instances of improper complaint deflection across a 3-year period. 2 senior administrators, including Patterson, face formal disciplinary proceedings. Principal Mercer has been removed from administrative duties pending a separate review of building-level complaint management. The findings explicitly reference the role of donor relationships in creating an institutional culture that discouraged escalation. Nathan was in the shop. He was holding a wrench he didn't remember picking up. Does it say that plainly? He said, the donor relationships. The phrase used, Renata said carefully, is that the evidence suggests complaint handling was materially influenced by the district's relationship with certain significant donors. Those are the exact words. Nathan set the wrench down. Grant Holloway is named, he said. The investigation names specific donations in the timeline of their relationship with complaint deflection patterns, Renata said. Whether that constitutes naming him depends on how you're reading it. Legally, the findings are as specific as they can be without making a claim that requires separate legal proceedings. What does that mean for him practically? He resigned from the advisory committee last week, Renata said. Quietly, I assume you'll see a statement from him before the day's out. His attorney has been in contact with the board about the advocacy fund. A pause. I think he's hoping the resignation and the fund are enough to close the story. Are they enough? Nathan said. For whom? Renata said. For the families, that's for the families to decide. For the public record, the investigation's findings are the public record. That doesn't go away. She paused again. Nathan, the board is meeting next week. The structural oversight proposal that Walter wrote, it's on the agenda. Nathan went still. It's on the agenda, he said. It was submitted by board member Catherine Rios, Renata said. She called Walter directly. She told him she had read his proposal 3 times and she wanted to put it to a vote. Nathan leaned against the workbench. 1 vote, he said. 1 vote, Renata confirmed. And you need to be there, with everyone. Nathan was there. They were all there. The families, Walter Ray, a room that was even more crowded than the first meeting, because the investigation findings had been public for 5 days, and the story had run a second cycle national this time, and people who hadn't known what was happening now knew and had decided they wanted to be present for what came next. The board voted 5-2 in favor of establishing an independent oversight panel with statutory authority and a 4-year protected term that could only be altered by public referendum. The room came apart. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way rooms come apart when people who have been holding their breath for a very long time all exhale at once, a kind of collective release that isn't triumphant so much as relieved deeply and completely relieved, the way you feel when a door you weren't sure would open finally opens. Denise Carroll turned around in her seat and looked at Nathan. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Nathan nodded once. She nodded back. I sat with Sophie that night and told her in the broad strokes what had happened. He had started doing this early on, telling her enough to understand without burdening her with the details that were his to carry. Sophie had a right to know what was being done in the shape of her experience. She did not have a right to have to carry the adult weight of it. She listened. She asked 2 questions, both precise and to the point, which was very Sophie. Is Tyler going to be okay? She said. This was her first question. Nathan looked at her. I think that depends a lot on whether the adults around him do a better job than they've done, he said carefully. Sophie nodded. He did bad things, she said. Yes. But somebody should have taught him differently, she said, before he learned that nobody could stop him. Nathan stared at his daughter. He had not said those words to her. He was certain of it. He had written them in the notebook weeks ago. He had said something like them to Ray. But he had not said them to Sophie. Where did you hear that? He said. Sophie looked at him. I didn't hear it, she said. I just think it. 7 years old, sitting at the kitchen table eating the apple slices from her snack, arriving at the same conclusion it had taken Nathan weeks and 2 legal pads to reach. That accountability and compassion were not opposing things. That you could protect the people who were hurt and still understand that the person doing the hurting was also someone who had been failed by the adults around him. Yeah, Nathan said quietly. You're right. What's my second question? Sophie said. You have 2. What's the second? She looked at him with his own eyes. Did it work? She said. Like actually work. Not just did things get written down. Did it actually change anything? Nathan thought about Walter Briggs and the independent oversight panel. About Denise Carroll's son, who had started eating breakfast again. About the Open Table Project meeting next week where 17 families were expected. About the slowly accumulated, unsexy, unglamorous work of showing up repeatedly until the system had no choice but to incorporate you. It started to work, Nathan said. Whether it keeps working depends on whether people keep showing up. Are you going to keep showing up? Sophie said. Yes, Nathan said. She considered this. Okay, she said, and went back to her apple slices. Nathan sat with her in the kitchen and thought about Laura's voice in the dream. And then you didn't, and then you didn't. He reached over and stole one of Sophie's apple slices. She didn't look up from her book, but she moved the container slightly closer to him, which was Sophie's way of saying, help yourself, which was the kind of small, specific, completely ordinary generosity that nobody else would even notice, but that Nathan had learned was where love actually lived, not in the dramatic gestures, in the moved container, in the kitchen at the end of an ordinary evening, in the fact that she didn't apologize for needing him anymore. He sat with her until the light changed and the room went warm, and the day finished itself around them, and he thought about everything that had led to this evening and everything that was still ahead, and he thought this is where it lives, not in the board votes or the investigation findings or the news cycles. Here, exactly here. Spring arrived the way it always does in Arizona, without apology, without transition. One morning, the air simply warm instead of cold and the light different, and everything adjusted to it, whether you were ready or not. Nathan was ready. He had spent the winter learning a particular kind of patience that was new to him, not the passive kind, not waiting, but the active kind, the kind that requires you to keep moving forward on a long road when you can't yet see the end of it. He had shown up to 3 more board meetings. He had sat at 17 open table meetings. He had driven families to appointments, answered questions at 10 o'clock at night, made calls he didn't want to make, and had conversations that were slow and exhausting and necessary. He had done the boring version exactly the way Denise Carroll had asked him to do it, and the boring version had turned out to be the version that actually mattered. The independent oversight panel was seated in February. 3 members external to the district serving protected terms, with a published process for receiving and escalating complaints that was printed on a single laminated card and posted in every school building in Mesa Verde Unified. Nathan had held one of those cards in his hands the week they went up and thought about Denise Carroll's son, about Marco Garcia in the hallway asking if Sophie was okay, and felt something settle in him that had been unsettled for a very long time. But it was the morning in April that Nathan remembered as the one that finished something. He drove Sophie to school. This was not unusual. He drove her most mornings. What was unusual was that this morning she climbed out of the truck and then turned back one hand on the door and looked at him with a directness that made him think, not for the first time, that she was going to be someone formidable. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, Bug? I'm glad you came that day," she said. "With the lunch. I know I didn't act like it, but I was." Nathan looked at his daughter. "I know," he said. "I was scared you'd make it worse," she said. "But you didn't." "I tried not to." "You really didn't," she said. "You were," she seemed to be searching for the right word, "you were smart about it." Nathan blinked. Smart about it was not a compliment he had expected from a 7-year-old evaluating his crisis management. "Thank you," he said. "I just wanted to say that," she said, and closed the truck door and walked into the school without looking back, with the particular forward momentum of a child who has said what she wanted to say and is done with the conversation. Nathan sat in the school parking lot for a long moment. Then he pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. I was not crying. He was something else, something that didn't have a clean word for it, the sensation of a man who has been carrying a question for months and has just without warning received the answer. He drove to the told Marcus good morning, picked up the first work order of the day, and went to work. Ray called him at noon. "Everything's still on for Saturday," Ray said. "Everything's on," Nathan said. "Gerald's confirmed the space." Gerald confirmed 3 weeks ago and then called again last Tuesday to confirm the confirmation, Nathan said. "I think Gerald enjoys confirming things." "Gerald enjoyed feeding people," Ray said, which was more accurate. "How many are we expecting?" "Well, Renata says over 200 RSVPs, families, community members, some people from other districts who heard about it and wanted to come." Nathan paused. "A reporter from the Phoenix Gazette. I told Claire." She said, "Go ahead." "Walter. Walter is bringing a presentation," Nathan said, "on the structural components of the oversight panel. I tried to tell him it was a fundraiser, not a symposium. He told me informed community members are the infrastructure of sustainable change." "He's not wrong," Ray said. "He's never wrong," Nathan said. "It's a quality I find slightly exhausting." Ray made the sound that was his version of a laugh. "Motorcycles in the parking lot. As many as want to come," Nathan said. "Same rules as always." "Same rules as always," Ray agreed. A pause. The comfortable kind. "Nathan," Ray said, "how are you?" Nathan looked at the work order in his hand. A straightforward job. The kind of thing his hands could do without his mind needing to be entirely present. He thought about the question. I think I'm okay, he said. Actually okay, not managing okay, actually. Good, Ray said. Ray, Nathan stopped. What? He tried to find the words for what he wanted to say, which was something he had been carrying for months and hadn't said out loud yet because he hadn't been sure how to say it without it sounding like something. It wasn't sentimental. Overblown, the kind of thing that makes men in their 40s look at the floor while they're saying it. I didn't know how to do this without you, Nathan said. At the beginning, I called you because I didn't know what else to do. I had no idea what came next. I know, Ray said. And you didn't tell me, Nathan said. You just asked the right question. What does Sophie need, Ray said. Yeah, because that was the question, Ray said. Everything else was logistics. Nathan breathed. How did you know that was the question? A pause, longer than usual. The kind of pause that Ray took when he was deciding how much of something real he wanted to put into words. Because it's always the question, Ray said finally. Who is the person who got hurt and what do they need? Everything else, the strategy, the meetings, the documentation, all of it, it only means something if you start there. The moment you start somewhere else, you've already lost the thread. Nathan stood in the shop with the work order in his hand and thought about the first night, the legal pad, the coffee going cold, writing everything down. He had thought he was starting with strategy, but he hadn't. He had started with Sophie. He had started with the image of her on the floor and the question of what she needed, and the answer she had given him without knowing it was an answer for somebody to finally listen. Ray had seen that before Nathan had. Thank you, Nathan said. Stop, Ray said. Saturday, Ray said. Don't be late. Saturday arrived warm and bright, with the particular quality of spring light in the valley that made everything look like it was being seen for the first time. Nathan was at the community center by 7:30, 2 hours before the open table fundraiser was scheduled to begin, because Gerald's people needed help setting up, and Nathan had discovered over the previous months that there was something grounding about helping set up chairs, something appropriately humble about it, something that reminded you what the whole thing was actually for. I was moving tables when Marcus arrived, then Tommy Reyes and 2 other club members, then Walter Briggs, who did not help move furniture, but instead stood at the front of the room and quietly rearranged the chairs into a configuration he felt was more conducive to community, which it was, and which Nathan did not point out. Families started arriving at 9:30. The Garcias came early. Maria walked in with Marco beside her, and Marco had grown several inches since the fall and carried himself differently. Not the rigid stillness of a child managing anxiety, but the easy looseness of a kid who has been for a few months now. Okay. He saw Nathan from across the room and raised his hand in a wave. A teenager's wave, too. Cool to be enthusiastic, but genuine under it. Nathan raised his hand back. The Petersons arrived together, Ray and Jill and their daughter Emma, who was holding a pan of something Jill had baked for the food table with the careful deliberateness of a child who has been trusted with something important. Emma was 10 now and had a seriousness about her that Nathan hoped would soften over time and a resilience about her that he hoped would not. Denise Carroll came alone. Marcus was in school Saturday thing, a science competition. Denise had mentioned it the week before with the barely contained pride of a mother watching her kid discover what he was capable of when fear wasn't in the way. She came in and found Nathan and stood beside him for a moment looking at the room filling up. This is something, she said. It's something, Nathan agreed. I didn't think, she stopped, started again. When you called me that first time, I told you I was done, I meant it. I know you did, Nathan said. And I was right to mean it at the time, she said. I need you to know I don't regret leaving. I made the right decision for Marcus. I know that too, Nathan said. She looked at him, but I also think this was the right decision. Coming back, differently. She paused. You did something I didn't manage to do the first time. What's that? You made it bigger than one family's complaint, she said. That's the only way it works. One family is a dispute, 7 families is a pattern, and a pattern is something a system has to answer for. Nathan thought about this, about the legal pad in the first page, and the question he had written at the top. What do the other families know? He had not known that first night how essential that question was. He had thought he was gathering allies. He had actually been constructing the thing that made the whole case real, the proof that this was not about one child's bad experience, but about a system that had decided certain families were acceptable collateral. I should have found you all sooner, he said. You found us when you were ready to do it right, Denise said. Earlier might have been messier. He looked at her. She was not a woman who gave comfort as a reflex. When Denise Carroll said something reassuring, she meant it as a factual statement. Nathan took it as one. "How's Marcus?" he said. "Eating breakfast every morning," she said. And the simplicity of it, the plainness, the specificity, made Nathan's throat close briefly. "Good," he said. She nodded. "Good." By 10 o'clock, the room was full. By 10:30, people were standing in the back. Nathan moved through the room the way he had learned to move through rooms over the past several months, stopping to talk, listening more than speaking, letting people tell him things he sometimes already knew, and responding as though he hadn't because the telling was the point, not the information. He had learned this from Ray, who did it instinctively, who understood that people's need to be heard didn't disappear once you'd heard them the first time. How was talking to a woman he had never met, a parent from a neighboring district who had seen Claire Bennett's investigation and driven 40 minutes to be here when he felt Ray at his shoulder. "Come outside for a minute," Ray said. Something in his voice made Nathan excuse himself immediately. They stepped out together. The parking lot was lined with motorcycles on one side and family cars on the other, and somewhere in the middle of that was the particular geography of a community that had learned something about itself. Gerald's staff was running a food table near the entrance, and the smell of something excellent was doing precisely the work. Excellent food smells do in outdoor spaces, which is to make everyone feel that wherever they are is exactly where they should be. Ray walked them toward the far edge of the parking lot away from the crowd. He was not in a hurry, but he had something on his mind. "I got a call this morning," Ray said, "from a woman named Beverly Holloway." Nathan went still. "Grant Holloway's wife." "Ex-wife," Ray said. "As of February, apparently." He paused. "She wants to come to the next open table meeting. Not as a Holloway, as a parent. She has 2 kids in district schools who are not Tyler." Nathan processed this. "She wants to come," he said. "She wants to come and sit at the table," Ray said. "She said she'd understand if people aren't comfortable with it." Nathan looked at the ground, at his boots, at the gravel under them. Beverly Holloway, a name he had never said out loud, never considered, entirely absent from every page of every legal pad. The woman who had been in the house when all of this was happening and was now apparently outside it too. "What did you tell her?" Nathan said. "I told her I'd talk to you," Ray said. "And what do you think?" Ray was quiet for a moment. "I think the table is called the open table," he said. "I think that means something." "It does mean something," Nathan said. "But some of these families—" "I know," Ray said. "You'd have to talk to them." Nathan looked at the building, at the families inside, at Denise Carroll, who he could see through the doorway talking to Walter Briggs with the focused attention she brought to everything, at Maria Garcia, who had given up 18 months in another school district and come back, at Dave Peterson, who had stood in his boss's office and said he knew exactly what he was getting into. He thought about what he had told Sophie. He did bad things, but somebody should have taught him differently. Tyler Holloway had a mother. Tyler Holloway had siblings who had nothing to do with his father's choices. And Beverly Holloway, whoever she was, had apparently made a choice in February that was his own kind of statement about what she was and was not willing to stand beside. "Let me talk to Denise," Nathan said. Ray nodded, didn't say anything else. Nathan went back inside and found Denise Carroll and asked if he could have 5 minutes, and walked her to a quiet corner and told her about Beverly Holloway's call. Denise listened without expression. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You're asking me because you think I'll be the hardest yes to get," she said. "I'm asking you because you're the one who has the most right to have an opinion," Nathan said. She looked at him steadily. "What does Ray think?" "He thinks the table is called the open table." A small sound that might have been a laugh. "Of course he does." She looked at her hands. "I don't know this woman." "Neither do I." "She might be entirely genuine," Denise said. "She might be trying to rehabilitate her family's name." "She might," Nathan said. "Both of those things can be true at the same time," Denise said. "Yes," Nathan said. Another silence, long enough to be real. "The oversight panel," Denise said. "The structural change. The reason that works is because it's not about one family. It's not about punishing the Holloways or protecting the Coles or avenging anyone. It's about building something that works for everyone, including people we don't like and people whose families have done things we don't forgive." She paused. If I say she can't come to the table, I'm saying the table has conditions. And a table with conditions is just a different kind of inside and outside. Nathan looked at her. Is that a yes? He said. It's a yes, Denise said, on the condition that she understands what the table is for. Not a place to be forgiven, a place to figure out how to do better. She paused. If she's actually coming for that, she's welcome. And if she's coming for something else. Denise looked at him with the level gaze of a woman who had navigated 2 years of things not going the way they were supposed to. Then we'll figure that out when we figure it out, she said. You can't build anything if you're too afraid of what might go wrong. Nathan nodded. He went back to Ray. Tell her she can come, he said. Ray looked at him. Tell her to come to the next meeting, Nathan said, and tell her the table is for everyone who wants to do better, not for everyone who has already done it perfectly, because nobody at that table has done it perfectly, including me. Ray took out his phone, sent a text, put it back in his pocket. Good hunting, he said. The fundraiser ran 4 hours. Toward the end, when the formal program had finished and the room had loosened into the easier rhythm of people who have done something together and are now just being together, Nathan slipped outside. He needed a moment of quiet, not because anything was wrong, because everything was right and he needed to be with that privately for a moment before the next thing started. He stood in the parking lot looking at the motorcycles and the family cars and the long afternoon light and thought about the morning that had started all of this. The lunch bag on the kitchen counter, the 30-minute drive he almost didn't make, the cafeteria door, the yellow sweater, his daughter on the floor. He heard footsteps behind him and knew before he turned that it was Ray. Ray had a particular way of arriving, not announcing himself, just becoming present. Nathan had noticed this the first time he met him and had noticed it every time since. Ray stood beside him, handed him a coffee cup from Gerald's table. They stood together for a moment without speaking. Sophie, Ray said. She's inside. Inside, Nathan said, sitting with Emma Peterson. Apparently they've decided they're friends. Sophia has informed me. This is a permanent arrangement and I don't need to do anything to facilitate it. Ray's mouth curved. Smart kid. She's terrifying, Nathan said, in the best possible way. Ray looked at the motorcycles, at the families moving in and out of the building, at Gerald's people clearing and restocking the food table with the practiced efficiency of people who enjoy feeding a crowd, at the whole assembled thing that had grown from a phone call at 10:30 on a school night into something that had its own momentum, now its own logic, its own community of people who had decided that showing up once wasn't enough. Showing up once makes noise, Nathan said. He was quoting Ray back to him. Showing up again makes trust. Yeah, Ray said. You said that to me, Nathan said, months ago. I know I did. It's true, Nathan said. Most things I say are true, Ray said. That's why I don't say many things. Nathan almost laughed. He covered it with a drink of coffee. The building door opened and Sophie came out. She moved through the parking lot with the forward-leaning energy of a kid who is looking for a specific person and has decided not to slow down until she finds them. She spotted Nathan and changed direction and came straight toward him, not running but close to it. Dad, she said, Emma's mom wants to know if we can do a play date next week. Can we? Yes, Nathan said. She said she'd call you. Okay. Also, Gerald's people have the little sandwiches left over, and they said we can take some home, but only if you ask because they feel weird just giving them to me. I'll ask, Nathan said. Okay, she turned to go. Sophie, Nathan said. She turned back. She was standing in the afternoon light, and she was 8 in 3 weeks, and she had no idea none how much of this had been for her. How many pages of legal pads and how many kitchen table conversations and how many phone calls at midnight and how many hours of sitting in rooms being patient, when patience was the last thing Nathan naturally possessed, had been organized around the single fact of her, around the image of her kneeling on a cafeteria floor, around the 9 words she had whispered to him on the worst morning of his recent life. She had no idea. That was exactly right. That was precisely how it was supposed to be. Nothing, Nathan said. Go back inside. I'll get the sandwiches. She gave him a brief, suspicious look, the look of a child who suspects she's being watched emotionally and objects to it, and then turned and went back inside. Nathan looked at the door after it closed. Ray said nothing. Nathan said she doesn't apologize for needing me anymore. Ray said no, she doesn't. She asked me for help 3 times this week, Nathan said. Just asked, like it was a normal thing, like asking for help was something people do without it costing them. It is a normal thing, Ray said. I know, Nathan said. I know that, but she didn't know it for a long time. Ray looked at him. She knows it now, Ray said. Nathan exhaled. He looked at the motorcycles. He looked at the families. He looked at the light on the pavement and the door his daughter had just gone through and the building full of people who had come because they decided a community meant something or wanted to believe it did or were figuring out together what it could mean if enough people treated it that way. He thought about Laura, about the dream, about and then you didn't. I thought about the legal pad, page 1 the night it started, Sophie on the floor, adults looking away, a boy who had learned that nobody would stop him, a father who had stood in a doorway and felt something break and had chosen deliberately not to let what it broke him into be anger. He thought about Ray asking, what does Sophie need, and what it had meant to have a question that precise when everything else in Nathan's head was noise. I thought about Maria Garcia's door opening, about Denise Carroll's voice on the phone saying, send me his number, I'll think about it, about Walter Briggs sliding a second folder across a kitchen table, about Tommy's attorney standing in the clubhouse saying, I'll ask her, about a woman named Beverly Holloway calling on a Saturday morning and asking quietly whether there was room at the table. I thought about the board vote, about the laminated card in every school in the district, about Emma Peterson carrying a pan of something her mother baked careful and trusted in here. He thought about Marco Garcia's wave across a crowded room. Teenager cool, genuine underneath. He thought about his daughter asking 3 times this week for help, like it was a normal thing. Ray was watching him, patient as always, waiting as always for Nathan to arrive at whatever he was working toward. Nathan looked at the building. Worth all the trouble, he said. It was Ray's question from months ago, the one Nathan had been expecting him to ask at the end of something. He asked it himself now because they were at the end of something or the end of the first part of something, and it felt right to say it out loud. Ray looked at him. You tell me, Ray said. Nathan thought about the cafeteria floor, the yellow sweater, the 9 words. He thought about Sophie inside the building, right now, sitting with her new friend, eating whatever Gerald's people had put out, laughing about something. A 7, almost 8-year-old laughs about her shoulders relaxed, in open her face, unguarded, not managing anyone, not calculating any cost, not making herself smaller. Just there. Just Sophie. Just a kid eating lunch without fear. Yeah, Nathan said. It was worth it. Ray nodded once, and that was all. Because some things, when they are true and when you have earned the right to say them, plainly do not need anything added. Nathan Cole had walked into a cafeteria with a forgotten lunch bag and found his daughter on the floor and chosen in the months that followed to do the hard thing the right way, not the loud way, not the easy way, not the way that ended fastest, but the way that built something that would still be standing when he and Ray and Walter and all the rest of them were no longer watching it. He had not rescued Sophie with force. He had not frightened a system into submission. He had done something harder and quieter and more permanent than either of those things. He had refused to disappear. He had refused to be made into the story they wanted to tell about him. He had stood beside the people who had been ignored for long enough, and quietly, methodically, with 2 legal pads and a phone, and 14 years of friendship, with a man who knew how to ask the right question, he had made it impossible to keep pretending they weren't there. And the thing that changed, the real thing, the thing that mattered under all the board votes and investigation findings and policy language was a little girl who no longer apologized for needing her father, who no longer made herself smaller, who walked through the world like someone who believed without reservation, without calculation, without the weight of other people's comfort pressing down on her small shoulders, that she deserved to be heard. That was the victory. That was the whole thing. That was what Hell's Angels actually changed. Not with a threat, not with noise, not with the story everyone expected, but by showing up again and again beside people who had been alone long enough that they had stopped believing company was coming. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stay calm when everything is telling them to document the truth, when everything is telling them it doesn't matter. Stand beside someone who has been forgotten long enough to forget. They deserve better, and refuse, absolutely and completely refuse to disappear until the right people finally truly hear. Nathan Cole picked up his coffee cup and walked back into the building to get his daughter and some sandwiches. The door closed behind him. The motorcycles gleamed in the afternoon light. And somewhere inside, Sophie Cole laughed out loud at something, the kind of laugh that doesn't think about itself at all. Open and easy and entirely free, and it carried all the way out to the parking lot, into the warm spring air, into the ears of a man named Ray Dawson, who stood quietly beside his motorcycle and listened and allowed himself just for a moment to smile.